Well, welcome. Tonight, we're going to get a view from the Mass Senate. So much going on, I hope we can squeeze it into an hour. And somebody who's helped Milford out quite a bit, who's here quite a bit. Why don't we start with an introduction, if there is somebody who doesn't know who you are.
Thank you so much. It's great to be back. I am State Senator Becca Rausch. I am in my third term in the State Senate. Milford came into the district that I represent. I'm just in this current term, actually. So I've been serving Milford now for 2 years, officially and kind of unofficially helping out a little bit before then. It's a great honor to serve, and here we are. I can't believe I've been doing this now the better part of a decade. It's really amazing how time flies.
Wow, that is amazing.
Yeah. Let's see, what else about me? I currently serve as the Senate Chair of the Joint Committee on the Environment and Natural Resources. It's my second term serving in that capacity. I also serve as the Senate Vice Chair of the Joint Committee on Children, Families, and Persons with Disabilities, and the Vice Chair, of the Senate Chair of the Census. And so kind of more focus on kind of the administrative side of things and making sure that we have good government processes in place. And I serve on 4 additional committees: Agriculture, Education, Emergency Preparedness and Management, and the Joint Committee on Revenue. I also serve on the Board of Directors for the Massachusetts Women's Legislative Caucus and the Board of Directors for the National Association of Jewish Legislators. And I am currently the only mother of children 10 and under.
I was going to ask, has that changed at all in the last 3 years?
Nope, it has not changed, and it does not look like it's going to change anytime soon. In fact, we're seeing somewhat of a departure of women from politics on Beacon Hill.
Really?
Yeah, there are a number of women who are leaving the legislature, which is kind of an interesting juxtaposition given that 5 of our 6 constitutional officers in the state are women. But we're seeing a notable number of women retiring from the legislature or leaving the legislature to pursue other offices. And most, not all, but most of those seats have no women candidates running to succeed the current members.
Now that doesn't make sense to me, because you took it on sounds terrible, at the worst time possible, when you have a child at home.
Yeah, 2 of them.
Yeah, you sit there and say, once the kids hit high school and college, I would think that it becomes easier for man or woman. Because, I've started again with grandkids. And we have 4 nights out of 5 between the taekwondo, the baseball, the t-ball, the soccer.
Yep.
So I'm amazed at how you can keep up with being a mother or a parent. I shouldn't be sexist, but
well, it's true. I mean, we can also be realistic about social norms in society, and it is, I think, different still for moms. I do have several male colleagues who have kids who are younger, but in terms of the women in the Senate, we're not even quite at a third yet. So I think we're just over a quarter of the members are women in the Senate at the moment, and my kids are the youngest ones of all of us, it's difficult to balance all of those things. I have a phenomenal, wonderful spouse, and he's great, and they're eating dinner as you and I are chatting.
well, that's the stuff that people forget. It's not the big events, because that you can always rationalize and schedule, but it's being home for dinner. It's going to the soccer games.
Yeah, I got a baseball game, maybe 2 coming up. We got the championship game, so it's big, exciting. One of the kids made it to the championship, so it's big, exciting baseball week in our house. I will say they often add a lot of really wonderful perspective to the work that we do on a daily basis. And their little faces are so cute.
Well, we're doing the recycle now. Now that we have an 8 and a 5-year-old.
Among the grandchildren. Yeah, my parents tell me that being a grandparent is the bee's knees.
Oh. we have debates with my ungrateful offspring, number one.
Mm-hmm.
God bless her. We were at a FinCom meeting, and my phone lit up, and it said, "You are a dead man."
Oh.
It was
What
Easter.
did you do?
My grandson saw a chocolate bunny and said, "Vovo, I need the bunny."
Oh, and you bought it. You
And
caved
I
like
thought
a house of
I
cards.
thought it was a hollow little bunny.
Oh no, and it was solid.
It was solid,
Oh jeez.
and I figured he'd eat the ears off and get tired. Oh no,
Oh no, I bet he ate the whole thing.
he ate the whole thing, and
Oh,
it's
yeah.
9:30, and he's playing Ricochet
He's, like,
Rabbit,
running around the house. Mm-hmm.
and then that's when he rat-finked me out.
Well, I hope your daughter finds it in her heart to forgive you for that.
Oh, she's very forgiving, just like my
That's
darling bride. My darling bride is forgiving me for things I did 20 years ago.
Well, that's nice.
She just keeps reminding me of the mistakes I made.
It's good to learn from your mistakes. We all try to learn from our mistakes.
Yeah, we're running into the same issue here in Milford with the FinCom, because we've got some openings. And
On the FinCom?
On the FinCom, and
Yeah.
I recently wrote to the selectmen and asked them, I know I'm not supposed to put preconditions, but it would be nice to get, we got 3 women out of 15 people.
Yeah.
It would be nice to get more women, and we have too many old people like me on the FinCom.
Well, it's really difficult. I mean, one of the challenges, the first office I ran for was town meeting in Needham, and you and I have talked about this before, but one of the big concerns is that if I didn't have a husband at home who was, like ready and willing to take on the bulk of the parenting responsibilities while I was sitting in town hall in Needham, several nights over several weeks debating the budget and other things on the warrant. I couldn't have run. You just can't do it. Some towns have actually made some interesting accommodations and shifts, right? Some places are actually providing childcare now during those kinds of big meetings so that parents of younger kids can engage and participate. I think to a certain extent, in certain places, COVID kind of provided something of a silver lining to show us that remote and hybrid meetings are possible. And so that does add an aspect of accessibility that parents of younger children previously, and many others, right? People with physical disabilities who have trouble getting out of the house, older residents sometimes. So we can learn from those silver linings as well.
Until the very end, we had my sainted mother living with us.
Mm-hmm.
So for 30 years, Grandma was always home. So we always had the safety valve.
Right.
It wasn't until dementia hit, when she was in her 90s, that all of a sudden you realize, boy, if I had an easy life, having a built-in babysitter.
Oh, yeah. It makes a huge difference.
But even at the FinCom, when we go into executive session, our town lawyer would just say, just leave. My mother's coloring. She has no idea what's going on, but I can't leave her.
Right.
So they put a table in the back, and she'd sit there and color.
Yeah.
I was so happy that the town would go that extra step.
Yeah. I've definitely taken my kids with me in a town meeting. And in fact, they sat on the floor and did puzzles and coloring and other things like that. And so that's kind of part of the reality.
Well,
but on the bright side, my kids know a lot about civics.
Well, the other thing is they know a lot more about you.
They know, they know the work that I do, at least to whatever extent they can take it in.
They can see what you stand up for, and
yep. Mm-hmm.
how much effort you put into helping everybody.
Yeah, we try hard, that's for sure.
So
and again, sometimes they actually help me, right? If I'm struggling with an issue or I want to get, I do focus a lot on youth mental health and education and other things that are in childcare, early ed.
Yeah, I was excited when my daughter ran for town meeting member. So now we're both there.
Yeah, you can do it together. So I ask them. I just ask them point blank, what do you think about this? And I have to put it into terms that kids in 2nd and 4th grade can understand. But most of the time, I'm mostly able to do that, I think. Sometimes my husband helps to kind of make it into digestible chunks that the kids can wrap their brains around. And often, not all the time, but often, certainly more often than not, they have really interesting insights that help me do my job better.
Well, it does put it in perspective as to why you're sacrificing so much.
Yeah.
You love to say it's for the town and for the people, but at the end of the day, those two little faces
Yeah.
put it right in.
They really do. They really do. Absolutely. And
So
all their friends.
The big thing that's always on everybody's mind at this time of the year, budget.
Budget. Yep. 'Tis the season of budgeting. Well, I think it's pretty well established knowledge at this point that the state revenues are on something of a roller coaster ride. So
Are we up, down? Where are we?
we're on a roller coaster. We're on a roller coaster, and that does make budgeting challenging. Our fiscal 25 budget, the House passed back in April. The Senate, my colleagues and I rounded out our Senate debates on the budget the last week of May, just before Memorial Day. And the budget came in just under $59 billion, which is a substantial amount of money, but is actually a little bit lower than we were last year for fiscal 24, in light of the uncertainty around revenue, this roller coaster ride that we're on with regard to revenue. There are some really, really fantastic things in this budget, and I think it's a particularly strong budget, especially given the somewhat uncertain fiscal moment that we happen to be in at present. The Senate budget invests more than $1.5 billion in early education and care. It's the highest investment in that sector ever in the Commonwealth's history. That's a huge deal. Through an amendment that we adopted on the floor, we are investing in public education at a rate of $110 per student, which is also the highest it's ever been, as my understanding is correct. Significant investments in public college, higher education, college education for folks through our community colleges in Massachusetts. Significant investment in climate, and in fact, we passed through one of my amendments, a plastics reduction effort, a pilot program specifically to help small businesses. I have a small business advisory council, and through my work with those small business owners and others, we came to learn that a lot of business owners and also customers would like to see less plastic. I think it's pretty well known at this stage that single-use plastics are harmful in a variety of ways. They're actually harmful to both planetary and personal human health from even before they are produced. So, plastics are a problem that we need to solve. And small businesses have said, we want to get in on that work, but the startup costs of shifting from plastic products to more eco-friendly products are really difficult for us to manage and muster, because our, small business, the margins are smaller.
What do you do?
So we I crafted an amendment, and we created a $150,000 pilot program to help small businesses make the shift from plastics into more eco-friendly products. So the budget is now.
But into what, metal? I mean, when you say
could
minimize
be metal, could
plastic,
be paper, could be anything that's biodegradable or compostable. There are a lot of alternatives at this stage of the game. So we can support that funding, and hopefully that will survive the conference process.
A lot of it is education, because I remember when they took away my styrofoam cups, I wasn't happy.
And you got all upset, and it's fine.
Until
the
somebody
sky
finally
didn't fall.
told me
Yeah.
what an impact it would have to go to paper. And then you're like, okay, I'm not happy about it, but I can accept it.
Yeah. So I think there's been a lot of really strong education about plastics, particularly single-use plastics, water bottles, forks. Did you know it takes 200 years for a single plastic fork to break down? And it doesn't break down into something that, becomes environmentally friendly magically. It never becomes environmentally friendly. It just breaks down into smaller pieces of plastic, which in turn get absorbed into the soils or the plant life.
Then you're into the whole microplastic problem.
Exactly. They become microplastics that then we eventually ingest. And there's at least one study out there that indicated that humans on average consume, through eating or breathing or drinking or whatever, but we take in a whole credit card worth of plastic every single week, which is wild to me. And some of that, not all of it, but some of it never leaves your body. So there are plastics inside of you right now, and me too.
There's
And your grandkids.
There's a lot inside of me. I was going to say, it takes a lot to keep this rotund figure.
Well, I think we could probably try to reduce at least the plastics part, right? Plastics inside of humans and also inside of, animals and, plant life. And I think we could probably all agree that that's not good.
Now, when you talk about a roller coaster, in the old days, you would hear that when the economy heated up, the capital gain tax helped. Mm-hmm. When it slowed down, the lack of capital gains hurt. What's the big driving force if we're doing a roller coaster on revenue?
I'm not on the Ways and Means Committee, so I'm not. This is not my area of expertise. But my understanding is that there's just been a pretty notable shift in how the revenues and things are kind of working out now that we are past the point of the federal funds coming into the Commonwealth since COVID. Right, when COVID hit, a lot of federal dollars came in, right, which was good, and we needed those. And now that's kind of done. So that has an impact on the revenue figures for the Commonwealth.
Yeah, because we appreciated the extra Chapter 70 money.
Now, we have fully funded, on schedule, the Student Opportunity Act. So that's where, in fact, the base budget came out of Ways and Means with $104 per student under SOA, the Student Opportunity Act, that's the acronym. And then through an amendment on the floor, we increased that even further to $110 per student. We also, on the floor, in the Senate budget, passed an amendment to set up a review commission for the Chapter 70 formula. Because we did a lot of really good things with the Student Opportunity Act back in 2019, but we continue to see all across the Commonwealth, I don't know of a single colleague in the Senate whose district isn't impacted by this, but particularly the rising costs of special education and out-of-district placements, and those costs are going up pretty significantly. So I think we need to take another look at it and figure out how to make a fix there. And so we did pass language to create a group of people, right? Get the smart, knowledgeable people in the room together to try to figure out how to further update our
for
our
the
education
longest
spending
time,
program.
we were following the trend of, when Milford High first came in, when we first built it, we moved into the new high school, we had 220 students graduate. That was in 74.
It's grown so much.
40 years later, we had 265.
Yeah.
So it was one child incremental per year.
Yep.
And now we're running to the 200 plus a year from the immigration kids. And let's face it, that's a lot of kids to take on. And we were lucky that the state came up because of that Student Opportunity Act. Mm-hmm. And we got an incremental $7 million 2 years in a row.
Yep.
To offset.
Yeah, so there are many good things in the Chapter 70 formula that we currently have. And there's always room for improvement. So, so we need to, we've done that. And frankly, also, Milford's looking at building a new high school at some point, at least in the foreseeable future, whatever the timeline happens to be. And part of that funding would hopefully come from the School Building Authority. And there's some work to be done.
We're in trouble.
Yeah, there's some work to be done there as well in terms of what those funding streams and formulas look like. So we're trying to do that work as well.
Well, we appreciate. I think it ends up being about 47% that we get from the SBA.
Yeah, the formula is different actually or not the formula, but the outcome, right? Yeah. The result is different for almost every school that I've seen go through the MSBA process.
But whether it's 40, mid 40s, high 40s, without it, it would be
impossible. It would be impossible. So you need that funding, and we need to make sure that funding matches, present day needs for how schools are built, right? Best practices, how much it actually costs, given the cost of materials, the cost of transportation, all of those different factors that come in. So, so we're going to try to put some smart people in
We're
the room to
always
figure
going to
out that
gripe
one
we're
too.
not getting enough. You're not giving us enough. But when we look realistically, 47% makes it feasible.
Well, I hope so. And I think we can also be real that a lot of people want a lot of services to come from government. And they should, in my opinion, want those things to come from government. But no one ever wants to pay more taxes, right? And so when it's the government, taxes are pretty much how the money comes in. And so unless we figure out a way to generate additional revenues, we won't be able to cover those services. We're not the federal government. We must balance our budget every single year.
We can't print money.
And then we can't print money either, exactly. So we have, that's a tough kind of tug.
How
right?
is that millionaire's tax working?
The Fair Share Amendment, it is working. It is working quite well. And it is why we are able to invest $1.5 billion in early ed and such significant money into Chapter 70 and also invest in transportation. Right? Those are the two pots of money, policy places where we can put the Fair Share Amendment dollars, right? It's either education or transportation, and that's it. So, so it is working, and those revenues are coming in.
Any downsides? I mean, the doom and gloom people said that people would be running away from the state, and
so far as I've seen, the sky's still up. I mean, look, some people are leaving Massachusetts. We can be real about what the data shows us, but I think what the data shows us much more significantly is that the people who are leaving Massachusetts aren't leaving because of the the high, very small surcharge on revenue on income over $1 million.
Well, that would be my question.
They're leaving because it's too expensive to live here, right? Because they can't afford it. The people who are leaving are the people who are slightly younger than me, because housing is so expensive, childcare is so expensive, right? Basic costs of living, kitchen table issues, all the costs that get racked up, right? Diapers, formula, all that stuff, all the way up through.
But we could recruit. When we were setting up our companies, we could recruit from the left coast or the east coast.
Yeah, but never.
It was never the square states.
Right.
Because even my brother-in-law got offered a senior position here in New England, and he's living in San Antonio, and he's got a nice 4,000 square foot house. It's a nice house.
Yeah, that's nice.
And
it's big.
He paid $300,000 for it. When he came out, he was saying, "Well, I know it's going to be a little more expensive in Massachusetts. What can I get for like $450?" And they said, "Maybe a split."
Yeah.
And it kept him literally from moving out here.
Yeah, you can't because it's just too much money. In fact, we were having this debate during the budget debates on the floor of the Senate. A colleague of mine stood up and said that their son moved to North Carolina because he could find, a really nice apartment in a really nice building with a gym and a rooftop pool and all sorts of other nice amenities for a fraction of what that same space would cost in Boston.
And that's the killer, because you want your kids close.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm blessed that my 2 grandkids are 1.5 miles away.
Yeah, my kids don't have that.
So, I mean, I only see my grandkids 4 days a week. My darling
only.
Well, it feels like only. I mean, I'm not seeing them today, but my darling bride sees them 6 days a week.
That's awesome.
But when they're looking to expand, I mean, the price, even in Milford, $700,000.
It is one of the most consistent concerns I hear from constituents all throughout the district. It doesn't matter if you're living in Needham or in Plainville or Norfolk or Milford or Bellingham, Franklin, wherever. Everybody is upset that their kids can't afford to buy back into the community where they grew up. Even when the kids want to, right? Not all kids want to. We could be real about that. But for those who do want to, right? they literally cannot afford it. And that is something that we are actually discussing right now, right at this very, well, not this very minute, because you and I are talking right now, but in this time frame, talking about housing and housing production, and how can we, within this, at the state level, try to incentivize and support, missing
No, I
middle
was
housing.
reading
Missing middle
about
housing is a big deal.
a program that Governor Healy wanted to put in where they taxed houses above $1 million, and that money would go back to the community for affordable housing.
Yeah, it's what they call a transfer fee. And the proposal is actually what we call a local option. So it's not mandatory. It's just kind of clearing out the brush of red tape on Beacon Hill, so that if Milford or any other community wanted to create this transfer fee, right? It's there are a couple of different ways that you can do it, but most of the proposals that we're seeing are talking about a fee on just whatever the sale price is that's above whatever the threshold is.
So the threshold would vary depending on the community, or?
Yep, and
okay.
the amount of the fee would also vary. Is a range, right? And we're seeing usually a range anywhere between 0.5% and 2%, on the dollars over a certain amount for the sale price. So basically, what the proposal is just getting Beacon Hill out of the way for communities that want to impose and create and implement this transfer fee. And frankly, from a housing policy is not my area of depth, right? I know enough to know how to vote, and I'm learning a great deal about housing policy. But where I do have a fair amount of expertise is in good government, right? In good government, government efficiency, government effectiveness, and just from that perspective, it hardly makes sense to not support it. Why would you want everybody to have to file a bill and go up to Beacon Hill and see if we can get the thing done? And there's a video on my website about how to pass a bill in Massachusetts in 20 easy steps, right? It's actually more like 50, right? Because every clearly delineated step has a bunch of kind of substeps to it. So why would we want to make all of our communities go through all of that if they want to put in a transfer fee in their own community?
Can they generate enough money in a transfer fee to make a difference?
My understanding is yes, and that it has worked in other places.
Because I can see Nantucket where the mean price is $4 million for a house.
Yeah, it's wild.
So even 1% can generate a lot of money, but
Yeah.
then again, you got to come up with $4 million.
I mean, look, I don't think anyone is thinking or looking at a transfer fee as the end-all, be-all of solutions. I think that in order to solve big problems, we have to have big sets of solutions. And housing right now in Massachusetts is a great big problem. And so we're going to need a lot of options for solutions, right? A menu of solutions to offer. And a local option, right? That's the town or city's option, right? It's up to the voters in that town. Is one of those menu options.
Well, I remember when the state gave us the option of adding a hotel tax and a meal tax.
Yep.
And I was happy that it was an option from the state.
Yeah.
Because I was dead set against the meal tax.
And now?
Still am, but I'm because I'm taxing myself.
Yeah, but you're also able to use those dollars to fund the
But
school.
the hotel tax, I was 100% for.
Because you're taxing somebody else.
Because every time I travel, I got the state tax, the local tax, the dog tax, the cat tax. It's like I went to New York and it was like 30% of my bill.
Is all the taxes and fees.
So, in Milford, thank God we went for that because, well, the way we figured is it's not going to be Milfordians renting rooms at the local hotels.
Yeah, that's true.
And if they are, it's not going to be discussed. Realistically, you got family come in once a year. But it's over $1 million
Yeah, it's not
that
a
it
small
generates
amount of
for
money.
us. So that $1 million, if you figure that 60-odd% of our money goes to school, that puts $600,000 into the school.
That is a notable amount of money.
For a little town like Milford, that's a ton of money.
Yeah, I'm not so sure you're so little.
No,
You have a lot of people here.
It's still 30,000. You still, You still can go out and know people wherever you go,
Absolutely. Well, that's part of the beauty of this town.
So from that end, I'm still not sure I want to put a tax on more Milford people.
Well, but that would be the point is not whether or not to put it in. The point is to let you answer your question for
Well, that's it.
yourselves.
When it's an option, I feel more
Exactly.
comfortable.
Exactly. And so, so from a government efficiency, a good government perspective, I'm not sure why we wouldn't do this. And frankly, I've seen the negative results of having not cleared the red tape in other circumstances. For example, there's a town in Western Mass that voted a long time ago to use ranked choice voting for their local elections. Right? You have 5 candidates. You pick your top. You pick your top one as number. You rank them as number 1. You say, well, if that person loses, then I want number 2. Then I want number 3. Right? It's like lining up all your favorite cookies in order. You can line up all your favorite political candidates in order. It's kind of the same idea, and you write them down on a ballot. So Amherst, out in Western Mass, voted to use ranked choice voting in their local elections. And then their legislators filed a bill because in order for it to take effect, it has to go through the state legislative process, right? The bill has to move through all those 20 plus steps and get all the way to the governor's desk and get signed before they can actually put ranked choice voting into effect in their local elections. And that has been kicking around for years after the voters voted to do this, and they still can't do it because it's stuck. It's just stuck, right? And that's it's just lag time. It's just unnecessary lag time. So clear the brush. Let's go. But put the power back into the hands of the people.
When we got the option of putting in a surtax on hotels, it seemed pretty clean. We all were for it because anybody who's traveling is paying it. The Gazauda is always there. We wanted to put in some of the Gazinta. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that just seemed to happen.
Yeah.
I can't.
Some towns will opt for it and some won't. And
but the idea was what you said. Make it
just make it
a
easier.
Local choice. Right. And once you make up your mind,
right.
20 easy steps.
Yeah. You don't need to add those 20 steps. Once you make up your mind, you should just be able to do it.
How's the immigration budget affecting everything? I mean, I see that we have a whole hotel, Best Western here in Milford, that was taken over by the state to help immigrants. How is the budget faring with the number of people coming in?
So I want to just clarify for those who are watching, that hotel and the rest of this program is called the Emergency Assistance Housing Program. It is roughly half at the moment, roughly half new arrivals into the Commonwealth, into the country. They've all come informed that they've all come in through points of entry. They have all, they're all here with legal status. And then the other half of people who are in that emergency assistance housing program are people who are not new arrivals to this country, right? Folks who have been in Massachusetts or, perhaps a neighboring state for a long time, and have run into a really difficult situation. That program is also limited only to people who are pregnant women, and families. I would hope that we can all agree that no one wants kids sleeping out in the street. So, that's where...
But what choice... I hate to interrupt, but we don't control immigration. That's a Washington thing, right?
That's true.
So when the kids show up, who's going to turn their back on these kids?
Exactly. So we took a vote on a bill a while back that provides funding and also kind of a step down funding, basically, to get this program under financial control. There was a huge expenditure when we saw just a big increase in the number of people who, pregnant women and children and families who were in need of shelter. And so we in the legislature have put in place a funding mechanism that is a step down
Well,
funding mechanism.
On a local level, we had our town meeting, and we had a town meeting member get up and blame everything on the immigrants and on the kids.
Mm-hmm.
And I try not to talk too much at town meeting, being on the finance committee. I just don't think it's appropriate.
Yeah.
But it just bothered me where I got up and I said, I thought I was going to get killed. Where I said, wait a second. Unless you're a Native American, we're all immigrants one way or another. And the last time I looked, the select board doesn't have the option to control immigration to Milford.
That's true.
They can't deport them to Bellingham or deport them to Rhode Island. The kids are here. They bleed Milford red. Get over it. Let's take care of them.
And what was the response?
Actually, it was pretty positive. I was scared that I was going to get a lot of negative response, but I
think
didn't.
at bottom, look, I do think at bottom, the majority of people share your heart, right? That, people are here and they're in trouble, and we want to start from that place of care and compassion. And, there are logistics that have to be worked out. Anytime you have, a lot of people come into a community, you need to work out the logistics.
Well,
so let's get to work.
Rebecca, to me, it's like Medicaid.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to pay for Medicaid. But what are you going to do? There are people that need help.
Yeah, well, we could take a lesson from almost any other developed country in the world, specifically about healthcare, where they have universal healthcare that we don't have, and their healthcare costs are drastically less, and their populations are overarchingly healthier than ours is. So I think we probably could learn a good number of things.
Well, we got to keep tweaking the
several
system.
of our European,
But in the interim, winter is coming. And what are you going to do? Put people out in the snow?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's.
I mean, I don't envy the governor because she's getting a lump sum of problem thrown at her.
She does. She does have to deal with things that were not of her making. That is certainly true.
And not of her
As
control.
do we all, and out of our control. Yep. Mm-hmm. Often the case.
So one of the big areas that you've championed has been reproductive health.
Yeah. This has been a huge part of my focal area and policy portfolio since I came into the Senate, and certainly even for many, many years beforehand. And today, actually, on the day of taping, today was a big day for reproductive health and justice in Massachusetts. And I was at the announcement this morning with the members of the Healy-Driscoll administration, where they are rolling out a robust campaign and education effort to address and make people aware of the harms that come from anti-abortion centers. And these are a significant problem nationwide, and Massachusetts is no exception. And I was listening to the commissioner of the Department of Public Health and the Secretary of Health and Human Services, and Congresswoman Clark, and the several other speakers, and I was remembering it's been 3 years since I gave the first speech on anti-abortion centers on the floor of the Senate. And that budget year is 2021, fiscal 22. We put $50,000 into a state-sponsored opt-in list of legitimate reproductive care clinics in the state. The fake ones, the anti-abortion centers, outnumber the real ones, the legitimate ones, by more than double in Massachusetts.
But
And
help
that
me
is
understand.
something. And so that was 3 years ago I gave that speech. And then 2 years ago, we, through the leadership of Senator Cindy Friedman and others, we actually passed the funding that made this program, this education and outreach program about the harms of anti-abortion centers, possible. We passed that funding. And now today it's a reality. And it's a sad reality that we need this program, but we do need it, especially given what is unfolding, what has already unfolded at the federal level.
Help me understand.
Yeah.
The pesky First Amendment says both sides get the right to have a voice. What is an anti-abortion center?
Yeah, anti-abortion centers are fake women's health centers that overarchingly are not licensed healthcare facilities and do not employ licensed healthcare providers, even though their staff might walk around in scrubs or a white coat and look like a doctor or a nurse. And these are centers that try to effectively confuse people. They sometimes use the same pink as Planned Parenthood. They intentionally locate themselves next door or across the street from legitimate clinics like Planned Parenthood, to get, and with sort of hanging a free test or free supplies or something like that, for pregnant women who are seeking abortion, but once they get into these places are misled or have services delayed or forced to see misleading ultrasounds that say "Hi, Mom" or "I'm a boy" or something like that, even at only 8 weeks, where it is actually not yet possible to delineate what sex the
And they don't
fetus
have
is.
to disclose what they are?
Well, that's where it gets tricky, right? That's where the First Amendment gets very tricky, because the First Amendment is not only about a limit on what the government can control in terms of speech. It is also, right, that you as a person in this country have a right to speak your mind, and the government can't really stop you. Not that it doesn't have its limits; it does have its limits, but for the most part, you get to say whatever you want, however hateful or awful or deceiving it may be. And there's another side of the First Amendment that also restricts what speech the government can compel. So there's a question, at least, as to whether the government could require, constitutionally, an anti-abortion center to, say, put up a big sign on the door that says, "We don't provide abortions here," right? There's a question. It's a legal question. Right, I'm not a constitutional law scholar,
Yeah.
so I'm not going to answer the question because I don't have a good answer to the question. But there's a question about it, so you have to kind of get creative. But a lot of times, the saying goes, the best way to combat bad speech is with good speech, with more speech. And I think that's what the government is doing right now, right? That what we and the legislature have funded and directed, and what the Healy-Driscoll administration is now putting into action, to ensure that people know how to spot the fake ones as distinct from the real ones, and can avoid getting into that problem.
Well, I would imagine that such a traumatic period in somebody's life, that the last thing you need is misleading or...
Yeah. And a lot of times that misleading and deceptive acts by fake women's health centers, by anti-abortion centers, can lead to a significant delay in care, where, say, a medication abortion might have been available, but that delay then makes it unavailable, or even misdiagnosis. In fact, not too far from here, one of these anti-abortion centers misdiagnosed a pregnancy, an ectopic pregnancy, and the woman almost died. I mean, it was really scary.
But don't they have
there's
to
a
be
pending lawsuit
licensed?
about that right now.
Don't they have to be licensed medical providers to do
No.
diagnosis?
Ultrasound technicians at the moment are not required to be licensed, nor are they required to work under the supervision of a licensed provider.
Wait a minute. You're not serious.
I am serious, and in fact, I have a bill that would change it.
So I could set up Al's taco stand and ultrasound clinic and have no training and provide that service?
Ultrasound techs, so let's be clear, right? Ultrasound techs provide an incredibly important service.
Understood.
And in order to make sure we have enough technicians to actually do the ultrasounds, it's important for them to be able to continue to do their work. I think, and I've worked with several experts in this field as well, that it is also important, especially given what we have seen in the last, come to light from this misdiagnosis, and it's representative, but it's not the only one. That we need to have that relationship with between the tech and a licensed provider who is licensed within the scope of their medical practice to read an ultrasound.
But wouldn't that be the same, and again, maybe I'm naive, but Planned Parenthood, for them to provide diagnoses and medical care,
Right.
aren't there rules on having licensed medical
Planned Parenthood does have licensed medical providers, yes. But a lot of the anti-abortion centers don't.
Okay,
And a lot of one of the things that kind of lures people into those anti-abortion centers is, come in, we'll give you a free ultrasound.
Oh.
Right? And so this is that, and several other components are pieces of my bill called the Abortion Access Act that builds upon some of the really significant, really good work that we have been able to accomplish in the last couple of terms in the legislature. We passed the Roe Act in 2020 over 2 vetoes from our former governor, Charlie Baker, who vetoed that bill twice. Had we not passed that bill, just so everyone is clear, had we not passed the Roe Act, when Roe v. Wade fell, we would have been in a very bad state because we still had laws on the books. In fact, we still do have some laws on the books, but we still had a significant number of laws on the books that did all but criminalize abortion that were passed in 1974 in the immediate wake of the Supreme Court deciding Roe v. Wade, that anti-choice legislators had to pass because of Roe v. Wade. But they did basically as little as they could and still meet constitutional
whether you're
requirements.
pro-life, not pro-life, pro-abortion, not pro-abortion, having medical providers with a minimum standard, ultrasound techs
read
probably are
ultrasounds.
great, but you don't worry about the 90% that are normal.
That's right. You worry about
The 10%,
exactly.
having a physician who can make informed decisions. And I would say on both sides. I wouldn't want to see that in Planned Parenthood, not have licensed medical providers.
And
But-
they do. In Planned Parenthood,
Well, that's
they
what
do
I'm
have
saying.
the licensed folks.
It's not that I'm for one side or the other. I think
Right.
if you're providing medical care, you should have medical training.
Yeah, and that's a big part of this problem, right? Is that these anti-abortion centers masquerade as legitimate clinics, and they are not.
I guess that bothers me. The idea of masquerading, whether it's for or against.
Yeah.
Now, we
bothers
move
me
on
too.
and say, we've had children.
Okay.
You've got 2.
Now we got to feed them and clothe them and bathe them and
you
use
got to have
diapers
child care.
child care and early education. Both of our children went to early ed, and I am so grateful for it.
But you're leading efforts to deal with more affordable child care, right?
Well, Massachusetts is one of the most expensive early education and care states in the country.
And we wonder
Right?
why
Yet another
people,
reason why people are leaving.
We
right?
wonder why people are leaving. Let's see. The housing
Exactly.
costs are way above. Child care.
It's just really, really expensive to live in Massachusetts. And so, this is also a little tricky because, childcare and early education for the most part is a privatized sector in Massachusetts, right? We don't have public
Right.
or public early ed like we have public K-12 education, right? So would we want to infuse money into the public education system for K-12, right, for elementary and secondary education, we could just put money into it because it's a public sector.
Because the framework's already there.
Exactly. It's much more difficult to do in the private sector. So when the sector is a privatized, but it's effectively a public good, right? We know, and in fact, COVID showed it to us pretty plainly, that childcare is necessary public infrastructure, right? If we want talented people, to be able to both have children and be part of the workforce, guess what? You have to have childcare and early education. And let's be clear that even in infant rooms, even in toddler rooms, there is actually curriculum, right? There's curriculum that these educators are teaching our babies and toddlers. and they roll that out. And all, the studies show that nearly all of our empathy is developed before our kids start kindergarten by the age of 5.
But again, what hits me is you look at the top child care. I mean, we were lucky when my oldest was born. There was an ex-teacher who figured out that it was more economically feasible for her to keep her 2 kids at home and take on 2 more kids.
Yeah,
So we had an educator.
that's amazing.
It was wonderful, but it was
amazing.
expensive.
Sure. Well, it's more expensive now. So we actually just passed in the Senate back in March, and a number of these provisions were actually also incorporated into the state budget that we just passed in May. But in March, we passed the Senate's 2.0 version of the Early Ed Act, and this would do a number of things. One that is, I think, among the most important provisions is that it would make child care financial support available to a much bigger swath of people throughout the state. Right, currently that in order to qualify for state funding support to access early education and care, your family income has to be half, right, 50% of the state median income.
Yeah, but that's a big number.
And-
I mean,
Well, it's not actually that big. That's still pretty small. Under the bill, that would jump to 85%. Now you're getting into where people are really feeling the crush, and we still don't have support. And in addition to that, anyone who does qualify for that state support would also have their financial contributions toward early education and care capped at 7% of whatever their income is. And that is huge. And the way the bill is crafted in the Senate, it would go up to 85%, and there's also a pathway to raising that to 125%.
but what's the mean income of Massachusetts? Do you know?
I don't have that figure off the cuff as we're sitting here. I'd have to look at it. But effectively, that increase will sweep in a number of middle-class families that are really
hard,
struggling to make ends meet.
It's hard to fight investing money in childcare if you want, and I apologize because it sounds terribly sexist, but there's an overwhelming burden on the mom versus the dad.
It's not sexist. That's reality.
Yeah, but it just
just
doesn't sound
is.
right. It should be 50-50.
It should. I agree with you. It should be, but it isn't. And in fact, we saw it in the data during COVID, right? The overwhelming number of parents who left the workforce during COVID because there was
women.
nothing were women. And in fact, I did some budgetary funding work to support the Office of Labor and Workforce Development, giving us some hard data about it. And the data, the proof was in the pudding. The data showed that it was largely overwhelmingly women who left the workforce, and also if among accounting for all other factors, it was also notably more difficult for the women to get back into
Well, once you step out,
exactly, it's very challenging.
it's a lot harder to jump back in.
So we've been set back pretty significantly.
And I mean, I've been lucky that, my darling bride is smarter than me. She's better than me at almost everything. So we split everything.
Yeah.
But we had the opportunity because of the positions we had to do that.
Right. And not everybody has those
You
opportunities.
know, we're going on the select board saying we want to get younger and female people on the FinCom to get their perspective. Well, if you make it harder that they have to take care of the kids,
right.
you can't have it both ways.
Right. You got it. You got it. That's exactly it. So we have to do some real work in this sector, and this bill would go a long way to achieving those goals. There's also a number of provisions in the bill that the Senate has passed and now is before the House for their consideration to bolster the workforce, right? Because it's expensive to take care of kids. It is expensive. There's just kind of no two ways about it, right?
But why are we working if it's not to take care of our kids?
Exactly. No, I mean, even within the child care and early education sector, right? To run these programs and have the supplies and even the air conditioning and the heat, right? Like these things they cost money. But our workers, our teachers, are also among the lowest paid in the Commonwealth. So we have a number of pieces in this bill that also go to improving and increasing early educator pay and creating pathways for additional education and training for people on that path to becoming, lead classroom teachers and other things like that for early ed. So in addition to providing supports for early educators to have childcare for their own children, right, which is also necessary. So, so there's a lot of really good stuff kind of packed into that bill, and I hope the House will take it up.
Well, again, you're going to get people like me that growl when you increase my taxes. I just can't help it.
No, nobody
You
likes
know,
to pay more taxes.
but
I get it.
I'm going to growl but still support
Yeah.
paying more for my kids or
Right,
some
right.
our kids.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing that I think we as legislators, if we're going to pass revenue reform, personally, I don't think it should be you who has to pay more in taxes. We have huge multi-billion-dollar multinational companies that operate in Massachusetts. They could probably pay a little more, right? Not the small businesses, right? They're also struggling and trying to make everything happen and stay afloat and keep their employees happy, right? Small businesses have a lot of work to do. But these massive, massive conglomerate companies, they could probably foot the bill a little bit more to support keeping a strong workforce, right? We have some of the best higher education in the world here, right? We want to teach them and train them and then keep people here.
To their betterment, you don't have a choice. If you can't keep parents in the Commonwealth.
Yeah, who's going to work in your company?
Right.
Exactly.
Coming to the end. Any last words? We didn't talk about the environment, which we'll take up next time you're here.
Yeah. Well, I would love, I'm the chair of that committee, so I'm very happy to talk about the environment. We've got lots and lots and lots of work to do. We have done some really great things over the last couple of terms, and not just setting specific climate action goals by 2030 and also 2050 for our state, but also really putting a lot of things into action. And the Haley Driscoll administration right now is doing a lot of that work and rolling that out. And it's wonderful to see. But we still have a number of additional pieces to do, including, but not limited to, reducing single-use plastics. And we have, it's something that I am focusing on. And we have air quality and soil quality and water. Water is a huge issue.
Just the PFA, PFOA debate.
Yeah, PFAS, yep.
Could take up a show.
You're right. Just that could take up a show.
But
and so we have.
Next time you come, we'll start with environment. That way we have fair time to discuss it.
Sounds
Thank
good.
you for everything you're doing. Thank you for the extra Chapter 70 money that the legislature voted in. Because without it, I don't know, it would have been a lot more difficult.
Yeah. Well, it's my pleasure and privilege to serve. Thank you so much for having me. It's always great to be here with you.
And as always, to our 6 loyal viewers, thank you for joining us. May tomorrow be a better night than tonight. God bless. And get involved. It's hard to beg people to vote, but we had 10% turnout. And you can see the issues that are coming up. You got to learn what your legislators stand for and what they're willing to fight for. Good night, all.